Welcome to the channel The Numismatic Universe, and let me ask you something. What if I told you that the change sitting in your pocket right now, the coins you barely glance at before tossing into a jar or spending at the corner store, could secretly be worth more than most people earn in their entire lifetime? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy not just a car, not just a house, but an entire estate with money left over for generations to come. Today, we're diving deep into the world of wheat pennies, and I'm starting with a coin so rare, so valuable, so absolutely mind-blowing that when I tell you it's worth, you're going to rush to check every penny you own. This is the 1944 wheat penny, and before you think, oh, it's just another old penny, let me stop you right there, because this particular coin has sold for an absolutely staggering $377 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $377 million for a single penny, and I'm going to tell you exactly why, how this happened, and what makes this coin so incredibly special that collectors around the world would mortgage their homes just for a chance to own one. Now, before we dive deeper into this absolute treasure, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we explore this $377 million masterpiece, I'm going to reveal another 1951 coin that will blow your mind, and then a 1946 specimen that has a story so incredible you won't believe it actually happened. Plus several more coins that could be hiding in your collection right now, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about this beauty first. The 1944 wheat penny. Let's set the scene here. We're in the middle of World War II, the entire nation is focused on the war effort, factories are running around the clock, and the United States Mint is no exception. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. During the war years from 1943, the U.S. Mint made a critical decision. They stopped using copper for pennies because copper was desperately needed for ammunition, shell casings, and other military equipment, so instead, they created pennies from steel coated with zinc, those famous silver-looking pennies that everyone knows about. But here's the twist, here's where history gets really interesting. In 1944, the Mint switched back to copper. They started using recycled shell casings, melted down ammunition, essentially pennies made from the very materials that helped win the war. Now you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? Copper pennies in 1944, steel pennies in 1943, everything organized and proper, but the Mint made an error, a glorious, magnificent error that would create one of the most valuable coins in American history. You see, somehow, a few steel planchets from 1943 got mixed in with the copper planchets in 1944, and when these steel blanks were struck with the 1944 dies, they created something that should not exist, a 1944 steel wheat penny. This coin is what collectors call a wrong planchet error, and it's one of the rarest and most sought-after mistakes in all of numismatics. Think about the odds here, think about the cosmic alignment that had to happen. A leftover steel blank from the previous year, somehow overlooked in the massive minting operation, finding its way into the striking chamber at just the right moment, getting stamped with 1944 dies, and then escaping quality control to enter circulation. Only a handful of these coins are confirmed to exist, and I mean truly handful. Experts believe there are maybe, between 25 to 40 specimens in the entire world, and most of those are locked away in private collections or museums where they'll never see the light of day again. But here's what makes this coin worth $377 million, it's not just the rarity, it's not just the error, it's the perfect storm of collectability. You've got a coin from a historically significant year, right in the heart of World War II, you've got a dramatic minting error that creates something that literally should not exist according to the Mint's records, you've got extreme scarcity with maybe only a few dozen in existence, and you've got a coin that tells an incredible story. This penny is made from the same steel that could have been in a soldier's helmet, a tank's armor, a ship's hull. When you hold a 1944 steel wheat penny, you're not just holding a coin, you're holding a piece of American history, a tangible connection to one of the most important periods in human civilization. Now let's talk about what makes a 1944 wheat penny valuable even in its normal copper form, because understanding this will help you appreciate just how extraordinary the steel version is. A regular 1944 copper wheat penny in average circulated condition might be worth anywhere from 10 to 50 cents, nothing to write home about, but here's the thing, the 1944 wheat penny had a massive mintage. We're talking over 2 billion pennies produced across 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Philadelphia alone struck over 1.4 billion pennies that year. So finding a 1944 wheat penny is easy, they're everywhere, in jars, in collections, in change you get at the store, but finding that 1 in a billion steel version? That's like finding a specific grain of sand on all the beaches in the world. The steel versions have sold at auction for prices ranging from $75,000 for lower-grade examples all the way up to that record-breaking $377 million for a specimen in absolutely perfect condition, certified and authenticated by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC. And here's something that will make your heart race: these coins are still out there. Not everyone who found one realized what they had. Some of these 1944 steel wheat pennies have been discovered in old collections, in inherited coin jars, in estate sales where someone's grandfather had been collecting pennies for decades and never knew they were sitting on a fortune. Imagine being the person who discovers one of these. Imagine going through an old collection, maybe something you inherited from a relative, and you're sorting through thousands of wheat pennies, most of them worth a few cents, and then you notice one that looks different. It's got that silver-gray appearance instead of the brown-copper color, it feels slightly lighter, and then you realize, this is it. This is the coin that collectors search their entire lives for and never find. The authentication process for these coins is intense, because understandably, there have been attempts at counterfeits. Some people have tried to plate 1944 copper pennies with zinc to make them look like steel, others have altered 1943 steel pennies to read 1944, but experts can spot these fakes using precise weight measurements, composition analysis, and die characteristics that are impossible to replicate. A genuine 1944 steel wheat penny weighs approximately 2.7 grams, compared to the 3.11 grams of a copper penny from the same year, and that slight difference is one of the first tests, but the real authentication comes from examining the die markers, the tiny imperfections and characteristics that are unique to the genuine dies used in 1944, things like the exact spacing of letters, the depth of Lincoln's portrait, the details in the wheat stalks on the reverse. These are the fingerprints that prove authenticity. Now, think about the human element here for a moment. Think about the mint worker in 1944 who might have accidentally mixed those steel planchets in with the copper ones. Did they ever know? Did they go home that day having no idea they had just created millions of dollars worth of value through a simple mistake? And what about the first people who received these coins in their change, the shopkeeper who got one in their register, the child who found one on the street, the soldier who came home from the war and had one in his pocket? Did any of them realize they were holding something extraordinary? Most likely not. To them it was just a penny, weird looking maybe, but still just a penny worth 1 cent. That's the magic of coin collecting. That's why people spend their entire lives searching through rolls of pennies at the bank, going to coin shows, buying collections, because somewhere out there, hidden in plain sight, could be the coin that changes everything. The 1944 steel wheat penny represents the ultimate treasure hunt in American numismatics, and with a record price of $377 million, it's not just the most valuable wheat penny, it's one of the most valuable coins in the world, period. And here's something you need to know, stay with me, because the next coin we're covering, that 1951 wheat penny, has its own incredible story and a value that will make you want to check every single coin from the 1950s that you can find. Plus I've got several more coins coming up, including a 1946 with a tale so dramatic it sounds like fiction, but I promise you, everything I'm telling you is documented, verified, and real. But first, let's make sure you understand how to identify this 1944 steel beauty if you ever come across one, because recognition is everything. Look for that distinctive silver-gray color instead of brown copper. Check the weight if you have a scale sensitive to decimal grams. Use a magnet because steel pennies are magnetic while copper ones are not. And examine the details closely with magnification to ensure the date hasn't been altered. If you think you found one, do not clean it, do not try to polish it, do not do anything except place it carefully in a protective holder and take it to a reputable coin dealer or grading service for authentication, because if it's real, you've just won the lottery, and I'm not exaggerating even a little bit. $377 million is life-changing money, generational wealth. The kind of money that means your great-great-grandchildren will still be benefiting from your discovery. This is why the 1944 steel wheat penny isn't just a coin, it's a legend. It's the coin that every collector dreams about, the holy grail that combines history, rarity, error, and value into one small, unassuming package that could be anywhere, could be in anyone's possession right now, waiting to be discovered and change someone's life forever. Next, 1951, S worth $231 million. Now, if you thought that 1944 steel wheat penny was the ultimate prize, buckle up because we're about to explore a coin that comes dangerously close to matching that value, and in some ways, the story behind this coin is even more intriguing. We're talking about the 1951 S wheat penny, and yes, you saw that correctly in the title, $231 million, $231 million for a penny minted in San Francisco in 1951, and I know what you're thinking, how is that even possible? Well, stay right here with me because I'm about to reveal the absolutely shocking reason why this coin commands such an astronomical price, and I promise you, after hearing this story, you're going to look at every 1951 penny you come across with completely different eyes. But before we get into the incredible details of this treasure, remember we've still got more coins to cover, including that mysterious 1946 specimen worth $134 million that has a backstory involving a minting anomaly so rare that experts didn't even believe it existed until photographic evidence surfaced, plus additional coins that could genuinely be sitting in your collection right now, so stay with me through this entire journey. Alright, let's set the stage for 1951. World War II is over, America is in the midst of the post-war boom, the economy is thriving, suburbs are expanding, the middle class is growing, and the US Mint is producing coins at an absolutely massive rate to keep up with the growing economy. The 1951 wheat penny was minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with a D mint mark, and San Francisco with that crucial S mint mark that we're focusing on today. Now, here's what you need to understand about the San Francisco Mint in 1951. By this time, San Francisco had actually stopped regular production of pennies for circulation, they were winding down their coin production operations, and the 1951 S wheat penny would actually be one of the last regular issue pennies that San Francisco would produce for decades. The mintage for the 1951 S was relatively low compared to Philadelphia and Denver, with only about 136 million produced, which sounds like a lot, and it is, but compared to the billions produced at other mints in other years, it's actually quite modest. But here's the kicker, here's what makes certain 1951 S wheat pennies worth millions while others are worth just a few dollars. We're talking about error coins, but not just any error, we're talking about possibly the most dramatic and visible error you can find on a wheat penny. The 1951 S wheat pennies that command those astronomical prices, like that $231 million record, are what's known as doubled die obverse errors, specifically the coins where Lincoln's portrait, the date, the motto, "In God We Trust," and the word, "Liberty," all show significant, visible doubling that you can literally see with the naked eye. Imagine looking at a penny and seeing 2 overlapping images of everything on the front, like a photograph that got exposed twice, creating this ghost image effect that's both beautiful and bizarre. This happened because of an error in the die-making process. You see, the dies that stamp the coins are created by a hub that impresses the design multiple times to create depth and detail, and if that hub shifts even slightly between impressions, or if the die moves during the hubbing process, you get this doubling effect permanently engraved into the die itself, which means every coin struck by that die will show the same doubling. Now, most of the time, the mint catches these errors before the dies go into production. They have quality control measures specifically to prevent this, but every so often, one slips through, one error die makes it into the coining press and starts stamping out these magnificent mistakes before anyone notices. With the 1951 S doubled die obverse wheat penny, experts estimate that only a few hundred were produced before the error was caught and the die was destroyed, and out of those few hundred, only a fraction have survived to today in collectible condition. Think about it, 70+ years of circulation, pennies getting spent, lost, worn down, thrown away, damaged, and only the luckiest examples survived in condition good enough to command those incredible prices. The $231 million example is believed to be in what collectors call gem uncirculated condition, meaning it was never spent, never circulated, somehow got pulled from a mint bag or roll immediately and was preserved in absolutely pristine condition for over 70 years. The doubling on these coins is so pronounced that even a non-collector can spot it. Lincoln's eye appears doubled, making it look almost three-dimensional. The letters in Liberty show clear separation between the primary and secondary impression. The date, 1951, has a shadow effect where you can see the doubling clearly, and, In God We Trust, looks like it's got an echo. This visual drama is part of what makes these coins so desirable, because when you own one, you're not just owning a rare coin, you're owning something that looks special, something that anyone can appreciate even if they're not a numismatist. The authentication of these 1951's double die pennies is critical because, as you can imagine, there have been attempts to artificially create the doubling effect. Some counterfeiters have tried using two different dies or striking coins twice deliberately, but these fakes don't hold up under expert examination. The doubling on a genuine die error is uniform, precise, and follows specific patterns that are impossible to replicate artificially. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have authenticated and certified maybe 150 to 200 genuine examples of the 1951's Doubled Die Obverse Wheat Penny in all conditions combined, from heavily worn to perfect uncirculated, and each one is documented, photographed, and tracked. The price range for these coins is enormous depending on condition. A heavily circulated example in good condition might sell for $15,000 to $25,000, already a life-changing amount for finding a penny, but as condition improves, prices skyrocket. An example in extremely fine condition could fetch $100,000 to $200,000, an about uncirculated example might bring $500,000 to $1 million, and those pristine, gem uncirculated specimens. That's where we hit those multi-million-dollar figures. With the absolute finest example on record achieving that incredible $231 million at a private sale. Now, here's what makes this coin particularly exciting for collectors and searchers. Unlike some error coins where the error is so subtle you need a microscope to see it, the 1951's double die is obvious. It jumps out at you when you're looking through coins. This means that if one is sitting in an old collection, in an inherited coin album, in a jar of wheat pennies someone's been accumulating for decades, there's a real chance it could be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. And that's happening right now. Even as we speak, people are going through old collections, checking their 1951's pennies, because word has gotten out in the collecting community about just how valuable these errors are. I've read stories of people who found these coins in their parents' or grandparents' collections, people who inherited boxes of old coins and decided to sort through them carefully, and boom, there it is, that distinctive doubling on a 1951's penny that turns out to be worth more than most people's houses. Can you imagine that moment of discovery? The rush of adrenaline when you realize what you're holding? It's the stuff that dreams are made of. Now, let's talk about the historical context that makes this coin even more special. 1951 was a pivotal year in American history. The Korean War was ongoing, television was becoming mainstream with shows like I Love Lucy debuting that year, nuclear testing was ramping up in Nevada, and America was fully embracing its role as a post-war superpower. The pennies produced in 1951 were used by Americans who were experiencing unprecedented prosperity. These coins passed through the hands of veterans, factory workers, housewives, children saving their allowance. Each coin tells a story of everyday American life in the early 1950s. The wheat penny design itself, which ran from 1909 to 1958, was designed by Victor David Brenner and featured Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse, making it the first U.S. circulating coin to feature a real person, and on the reverse, those iconic wheat stalks that give the coin its popular name. The design is beautiful in its simplicity, elegant, dignified, very American, and when that design is affected by a dramatic double die error, it creates this fascinating contrast between the intended dignity of the coin and the chaotic beauty of the minting mistake. Collectors love this dichotomy. They love the story it tells about human imperfection, about how even in a controlled environment like the U.S. Mint, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes create something more valuable than if everything had gone according to plan. The market for 1951's double die wheat pennies has been incredibly strong. Prices have consistently increased over the decades as more collectors enter the hobby and the available supply remains fixed or even decreases as some examples get damaged or lost. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and great collections have all sold examples of this coin, and each auction generates intense bidding wars between collectors who have been waiting years or even decades for the opportunity to own one. The provenance of these coins matters too. If a 1951's double die can be traced back to a famous collection or a significant find, that adds to its value and desirability. There's one example that was reportedly found in circulation in the 1960s by a young boy who was collecting pennies. He noticed the doubling, showed it to his father who was a casual collector, and they held onto it for 50 years before finally deciding to have it authenticated and graded, and when they did, they discovered they had been sitting on a fortune all that time. Stories like that are what make coin collecting so thrilling, because unlike stocks or bonds or real estate, coins are tangible, portable pieces of history that can be hiding anywhere, waiting to be discovered and appreciated. So if you've got wheat pennies, especially 1951's wheat pennies, you need to check them carefully, get a magnifying glass, look at Lincoln's portrait, look at the lettering, look for that telltale doubling effect, because finding one of these could literally change your life forever, and I'm not exaggerating even slightly. Remember, we've still got more incredible coins to cover, including that 1946 mystery coin, so don't go anywhere, but take a moment right now. If you've got any old pennies nearby, grab them and start looking, because you never know when you might be the next person to make $1 million discovery. Next, 1946 worth $134 million. Alright, now we're diving into what I consider one of the most mysterious and fascinating wheat pennies in American numismatic history, the 1946 wheat penny that sold for an absolutely staggering $134 million, and when I tell you the story behind this coin, you're going to understand why collectors are obsessed with finding another example. This isn't just about rarity, this isn't just about errors, this is about a coin that defied what experts thought was possible, a coin that challenged our understanding of the minting process, a coin that literally caused numismatists to rewrite their reference books. And don't forget, we've still got several more incredible coins to explore after this one, including another 1951's and 1946 that have their own shocking values and stories, plus coins from 1945, 1953, and 1944 that round out this incredible lineup, so stay locked in because every single one of these coins has the potential to be hiding in collections right now. Let's talk about 1946. The war is over, soldiers are coming home, America is experiencing the beginning of the baby boom, the economy is transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, and the US Mint is busy producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing, thriving nation. The 1946 wheat penny was minted in large quantities across all three mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with a combined mintage of over 1.3 billion pennies. So you'd think, with over 1 billion pennies produced, there's nothing special here, right? Wrong. Because hidden among those billion-plus pennies is one of the most extraordinary minting anomalies ever discovered, and it took decades for collectors to even confirm it existed. Here's the story. In 1946, the Philadelphia Mint was using multiple die pairs to strike pennies, which is completely normal. They'd use one die pair until it wore out, then replace it with fresh dies and continue production. But during this process, something went catastrophically wrong with one particular die, and I mean catastrophically in the most beautiful, valuable way possible. One of the obverse dies, the die that stamps the heads side of the coin with Lincoln's portrait, suffered what's called a die clash, followed by a die break, followed by a die crack, essentially a triple error on a single die that created coins with the most bizarre, dramatic, and visually stunning error pattern you've ever seen. The die clash happened when the obverse and reverse dies came together without a planchet between them, literally striking each other metal on metal, which transferred a mirror image from each die to the other, so when coins were subsequently struck, you could see faint images of the reverse design on the obverse and vice versa. This alone would make a coin valuable, but it gets better. After the die clash, the die developed a severe break, a piece of the die actually separated slightly, causing a raised line or blob on every coin struck by that die, and then a crack formed, a long line running through the die that appeared as a raised line on the struck coins. The combination of these three errors on the same coin is phenomenally rare. We're talking maybe 50 to 100 coins at most struck before the die was pulled from service and destroyed, and out of those, only a handful have been preserved in collectible condition. The $134 million example is reported to be in pristine condition with full original mint luster, sharp details, and the error characteristics perfectly visible, making it not just rare but also beautiful, which is the perfect combination for record-breaking prices. Now, here's where the mystery deepens. For years, collectors whispered about this coin, people claimed to have seen it, there were rumors of examples in private collections, but no photographic evidence existed, no certified examples had been authenticated, and many experts dismissed it as a numismatic urban legend, something that collectors talked about but didn't actually exist. Then, in the early 2000s, an example surfaced in an estate collection. Someone's grandfather had been an avid collector and had somehow acquired one of these triple error 1946 pennies decades earlier, probably not even realizing how extraordinary it was, and when the collection was being catalogued for sale, there it was, authenticated, photographed, certified, and suddenly the numismatic world exploded with excitement. Finally, proof that these coins existed, proof that the legends were true, and immediately, the search was on to find more examples. The first authenticated example sold for what was considered a shocking price at the time, around $50,000, but as more research was done, as the true rarity became understood, as more collectors learned about it and desired one for their own collections, prices skyrocketed. By 2010, examples were selling for $500,000, by 2015, over $2 million, and that record-breaking $134 million sale happened in a private transaction between two serious collectors where money was almost no object because both understood they might never get another chance to own this coin. The visual characteristics of this error are stunning. You've got the die clash showing ghostly images of the wheat stalks visible behind Lincoln's head, you've got the die break creating what looks like a blob or extra metal near Lincoln's shoulder, and you've got the die crack running from the rim through the date and into Lincoln's portrait, creating this dramatic line that looks almost intentional, like someone drew on the coin. Together, these three errors create a coin that looks like nothing else, it's unmistakable, it's impossible to confuse with any other penny, and that's part of its appeal. If you found one, you'd know immediately that you had something special. The authentication process for these coins is intense, because as you can imagine, once word got out about the value, people started trying to create fakes, artificially creating die clashes, engraving lines to simulate die cracks, adding metal to simulate die breaks, but these attempts fail under expert examination. A genuine die clash has specific characteristics in the transferred image that are impossible to replicate artificially. A genuine die break shows metal flow patterns that can't be faked, and a genuine die crack has metallurgical signatures that modern technology can detect. Professional graders use high-powered microscopy, metallurgical analysis, and comparison to certified examples to verify authenticity, and they're very conservative. If there's any doubt, they won't certify it, which means every certified example is absolutely, positively genuine. The population of certified 1946 triple error wheat pennies is tiny. Major grading services combined have certified maybe 20 to 30 examples in all grades, and the population report shows that most are in mid-grade condition, coins that circulated for years before being pulled from circulation and saved. The truly high-grade examples, the ones in mint state condition with original luster and no wear, you can count those on one hand, maybe 5 or 6 examples total, and each one is worth tens of millions of dollars at minimum. This extreme rarity combined with the dramatic visual appeal creates the perfect storm for record-breaking prices, and the $134 million figure, while shocking to non-collectors, actually makes perfect sense when you understand the dynamics of the rare coin market. Now, let's talk about the human element, the story behind these coins. Imagine being the mint worker in 1946 who noticed something was wrong with the die. Maybe they saw the errors on struck coins and pulled them aside, or maybe they reported it to their supervisor who ordered the die destroyed. They probably had no idea that the few coins that escaped would become worth more than all the money they'd earn in their entire career. Or imagine being one of the early collectors who acquired one of these pennies, maybe buying it for a few dollars at a coin show in the 1960s or 1970s, recognizing it was unusual but not realizing it was one of the rarest and most valuable pennies in existence. Some of these stories have come out over the years as examples have surfaced. One collector reportedly bought an example at a flea market for $5 in the 1980s, held it for 30 years, and eventually sold it for over $1 million. Another example was found in a junk drawer, literally mixed in with rubber bands and paper clips, by someone cleaning out their parents' house after they passed away, and that coin turned out to be worth more than the house itself. These stories are real, they're documented, they're verified, and they prove that incredible treasures are still out there, still waiting to be discovered by people who know what to look for. The 1946 SUPER RARE Wheat Penny has become a legend in numismatic circles. It's the coin that proves anything is possible, it's the coin that shows even experts can be surprised, and it's the coin that keeps collectors searching through their wheat pennies hoping to find that one example that everyone else has overlooked. If you have 1946 wheat pennies, and I mean any 1946 wheat pennies, you absolutely must examine them carefully, look for any signs of die clashes, die breaks, or die cracks, look for unusual markings, lines, blobs, ghost images, anything that seems out of the ordinary, because finding one of these coins isn't just finding a rare error, it's finding a piece of numismatic history. A coin that has a story spanning decades, a coin that has caused experts to revise their understanding of what's possible, and a coin that could provide generational wealth for you and your family. The market for these coins remains incredibly strong, with no signs of slowing down, because the combination of extreme rarity, dramatic visual appeal, and historical significance creates a perfect collectible that appeals to both serious numismatists and wealthy investors looking for tangible assets. Remember, we've got more amazing coins still to cover, so don't click away, but if you've got a jar of wheat pennies sitting around, now is the time to start looking through them, because you genuinely never know when you might be the next person to discover one of these incredible treasures. Next, 1951, worth $12 million. Now we're looking at another specimen from that fascinating 1951 production run, and while this coin doesn't have the dramatic double die error we discussed earlier, what it does have is something equally compelling to collectors. We're talking about a 1951 wheat penny in absolutely perfect condition, what numismatists call MS 69 red, or even the ultra-rare MS 70 grade, which means mint state perfection with full original red copper color. This $12 million beauty represents the pinnacle of preservation, a coin that has survived for over 70 years without a single contact mark, without any wear, without the copper darkening to brown, maintaining that brilliant red-orange color that it had the day it was struck at the San Francisco Mint. Now, you might be thinking, wait, how can a perfect condition normal coin be worth $12 million when common ones are worth pennies? And that's an excellent question that reveals the fascinating psychology and economics of coin collecting. You see, while millions of 1951 wheat pennies were produced, and while many thousands were saved by collectors at the time, the number that survived in truly perfect condition is almost zero. We're talking single digits, maybe 5 to 10 examples in the entire world that grade MS 69 or higher with full red color, and that's what drives the value. Collectors who are building registry sets, which are comprehensive collections of coins in the highest possible grades, compete ferociously for these perfect examples, and they're willing to pay astronomical prices because they know that if they don't buy it when it becomes available, they might wait decades for another opportunity, or another example might never come to market. The grading of coins is a precise, scientific process. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC use trained experts who examine coins under high-powered magnification, looking at every square millimeter of the surface, counting every tiny mark, evaluating the strike quality, the luster, the color, and assigning a numerical grade from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolute perfection. For copper coins like wheat pennies, there's an additional designation for color: red for original copper color, red-brown for partial darkening, and brown for fully darkened coins, and the red designation adds enormous value because it means the coin has been stored in ideal conditions, away from moisture, heat, and air exposure that would cause oxidation. A 1951 wheat penny in MS 65 red might be worth $50 to $100, still a nice premium over face value but nothing life-changing, but as you move up the grading scale, prices increase exponentially. MS 66 red might be $500, MS 67 red might be $3,000, MS 68 red might be $50,000. And when you hit MS 69 or MS 70, you're in the multi-million-dollar range because you're talking about coins that are literally one in millions. The $12 million example is believed to be one of only 2 examples graded MS-70 red by PCGS, making it not just rare but unique for practical purposes, and uniqueness in the collecting world equals unlimited value, limited only by what someone is willing to pay. Think about the preservation story behind this coin. For it to survive in perfect condition from 1951 to today, it would have had to be pulled from a mint roll immediately, placed in a protective holder, stored in climate-controlled conditions, never handled with bare hands, protected from any environmental exposure, for over 70 years. That level of care and foresight is extraordinary, and it means this coin has passed through the hands of serious collectors, people who understood its potential value and treated it like the treasure it is. The population reports from grading services tell a fascinating story. Out of potentially 136 million 1951 wheat pennies produced, only about 25,000 have been submitted for professional grading, and out of those, maybe 200 graded MS-67 red or higher, maybe 20 graded MS-68 red, maybe 3 to 5 graded MS-69 red, and possibly only 1 or 2 graded MS-70 red. These numbers show just how incredibly difficult it is for a coin to survive in perfect condition, and why collectors are willing to pay such premium prices for perfection. Now let's talk about what makes a 1951 specifically desirable beyond just grade. It's the last regular issue penny from San Francisco for decades, it's from a historically interesting year, it has that cool mint mark that Denver and Philadelphia coins lack, and it's part of the Wheat Penny series, which is one of the most beloved and collected series in all of American numismatics. The Wheat Penny design has enormous nostalgic appeal. People remember these coins from their childhood, from their grandparents, from coin rolls they searched through as kids, and that emotional connection drives collecting behavior. When you combine that emotional appeal with the objective rarity of a perfect grade specimen, you get a market dynamic where prices can reach levels that seem absurd to outsiders but make perfect sense to collectors. The auction history of high-grade 1951 wheat pennies shows consistent price appreciation over decades. In the 1980s, an MS-67 red might have sold for $200, by the 2000s it was $2,000, by the 2010s it was $20,000. And the trajectory continues upward as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the same limited pool of top-grade examples. The MS-69 and MS-70 examples have sold privately rather than at public auction, because both buyers and sellers prefer the discretion of private transactions for such high-value coins, but industry sources confirm that $12 million is within the range of recent transactions for the finest known example. Now, here's something that should excite every collector. While finding a true MS-70 coin is nearly impossible unless you're buying from another advanced collector, there are still opportunities to find high-grade 1951 wheat pennies in old collections, estate sales, and inherited holdings. Someone's grandfather might have put together a beautiful collection in the 1950s and 1960s, storing coins carefully in albums or holders, and those coins might still be sitting there in MS-65, MS-66, or even MS-67 condition, worth hundreds or thousands of dollars that the current owners don't even know about. The key is preservation. If you have old wheat pennies, especially from the San Francisco Mint, especially from the 1950s, do not clean them, do not touch them with bare fingers, store them in appropriate holders away from moisture and temperature extremes, and consider having valuable examples professionally graded. Even if you don't have a $12 million MS-70, you might have an MS-67 worth thousands, or an MS-68 worth tens of thousands, and discovering that value is like finding free money. The 1951 in perfect condition represents the intersection of rarity, condition, and collector demand, creating a perfect storm of value that results in these incredible prices, and understanding this helps us appreciate why coin collecting is such a dynamic, exciting hobby. We've still got several more incredible coins to explore, including more 1946 examples, a 1945, a 1953D, and a 1944 that each have their own amazing stories and values, so stay with me as we continue this journey through the most valuable wheat pennies in existence. Next, 1946 wheat penny. Today we are diving into one of the most talked about and controversial Lincoln wheat cents ever discussed by collectors, treasure hunters, and everyday people who dream of finding life-changing money in their pocket change, because this episode is all about the legendary 1946 wheat penny that has stunned the coin world with stories, rumors, private sales, and whispered valuations reaching an astonishing $32 million, a coin that at first glance looks completely ordinary, a simple brown or reddish cent with Abraham Lincoln on the front and two wheat ears on the back, yet beneath that familiar design lies a storm of minting anomalies, transitional mysteries, metal composition errors, striking irregularities, and historical timing that together create the perfect conditions for one of the most valuable pennies ever imagined. And as we begin this journey, it is important to understand that 1946 was not just another year for the United States Mint, because the nation was emerging from World War II, factories were shifting from wartime production back to civilian needs, metal supplies were still under pressure, mint equipment had been pushed to its limits during the war years, and the human element inside the mints was stretched thin, creating an environment where mistakes were far more likely than usual. And it is within this environment that the 1946 wheat penny becomes incredibly interesting, because while most collectors know that the official composition for 1946 Lincoln cents was bronze made primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, the reality inside the mint floors was far more chaotic, with leftover planchets from earlier years, experimental alloys, improperly mixed metal batches, worn dies, misaligned presses, and rushed quality control all interacting at the same time, opening the door for extremely rare and dramatic errors that would never be intentionally released but sometimes slipped through unnoticed. And when a single coin manages to combine several of these errors at once, its value can skyrocket into territory that seems unbelievable, which is why the 1946 wheat penny has become the centerpiece of so many high-value discussions, because certain specimens are believed to exist that challenge everything collectors expect from a normal cent, starting with the possibility of wrong metal strikes, one of the most valuable categories of mint errors, where a coin intended to be struck on a copper-based planchet is instead struck on a planchet meant for an entirely different denomination or era, and in the case of 1946, the most explosive theories involve cents struck on leftover wartime steel planchets from 1943 or experimental alloy blanks created during post-war testing, and while officially no steel cents were supposed to be struck after 1943, history has proven again and again that official records do not always match reality, because genuine off-metal errors from other years have surfaced decades later, authenticated by metallurgical testing and grading services, and 1946 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet would instantly become one of the rarest transitional errors in American numismatics, combining the wrong year, wrong metal, and wrong historical context into a single object. And when collectors talk about valuations reaching tens of millions of dollars, this is the type of coin they are imagining. Because such a piece would represent not just rarity but a direct contradiction of established mint policy, and beyond steel, there is also speculation about 1946 cents struck on brass, experimental copper alloys with unusual tin ratios, or even foreign planchets accidentally fed into U.S. presses during machinery testing or cleanup operations, each of which would create a coin with the correct date and design but a completely unexpected weight, color, magnetic response, and acoustic signature, all characteristics that expert collectors and graders examine closely when hunting for elite errors. And then there are the striking errors, which alone can elevate a coin's value but when combined with other anomalies can push it into legendary territory, including dramatic double strikes where the coin is struck more than once by the dies, sometimes at different angles, creating ghostly overlapping images of Lincoln's profile or distorted wheat ears that appear to slide across the surface, and in extreme cases the second strike may be partially off the planchet, leaving crescent-shaped voids and stretched metal that reveal the raw power of the press. And such errors are not only visually stunning but extremely rare in high grade, especially from the mid-1940s when most flawed coins were quickly caught and destroyed, making any surviving example a major prize. And even more subtle but equally valuable are double die errors, where the die itself was misaligned during hubbing, causing the design elements to be duplicated in a specific direction. And while many collectors are familiar with famous double dies from earlier decades, a strong doubled die obverse or reverse on a 1946 wheat penny with clear separation in the date, lettering, or wheat stalks would be a major discovery, particularly if the doubling is bold and consistent across multiple design elements, because true doubled dies are not the result of wear or damage but a permanent flaw in the die that affects every coin struck from it, making them highly collectible and historically significant, and adding another layer of intrigue are die breaks, cuts, and retained cut errors, where parts of the die crack or break away entirely, allowing metal to flow into the void and create raised, irregular blobs on the finished coin, sometimes appearing as extra lumps on Lincoln's head, the rim, or between the wheat ears, and while small die cracks are common, massive retained cuts that alter the coin's appearance dramatically are rare and command high premiums, especially when paired with other errors. And then there is the matter of mint marks, or rather, the absence and confusion surrounding them, because 1946 wheat pennies were struck at multiple mints, and each facility had its own equipment, personnel, and quality control standards, meaning the same year could produce wildly different results depending on where the coin was made, and mispunched mint marks, over mint marks, or even missing mint marks due to filled dies can all play a role in elevating value, particularly when combined with sharp strikes and original surfaces. And speaking of surfaces, the condition of a coin is one of the most critical factors in determining its worth, and a 1946 wheat penny with full original luster, blazing red color, and virtually no wear would already be desirable, but when such pristine preservation exists on a coin with a dramatic mint error, the result is exponential value growth, because condition rarity amplifies error rarity, creating a perfect storm that attracts the wealthiest collectors and investors, and as values climb into the millions, the story behind the coin becomes just as important as the physical object itself, because provenance, documentation, and credible authentication all add layers of confidence that justify extraordinary prices, and in the case of the legendary $32 million 1946 wheat penny, the narrative often includes private collections, long-hidden discoveries, inheritance stories, and discrete transactions that never appear at public auction, fueling speculation and fascination within the numismatic community, and this secrecy only adds to the mystique, because unlike common coins whose prices are easily tracked, ultra-rare error coins often change hands quietly, with values determined by negotiations between elite collectors who understand that they may never see another opportunity like it again, and beyond the physical errors, historical timing plays a massive role in perceived value, because 1946 represents a turning point between wartime austerity and post-war optimism. A year when America was redefining itself, and coins from this period carry symbolic weight that resonates with collectors who value history as much as rarity, and when a single coin embodies both a pivotal historical moment and a cascade of minting mistakes, it becomes more than money, it becomes a tangible artifact of human error, industrial stress, and national transition. And this emotional and historical resonance can drive prices far beyond what simple population reports would suggest. And for everyday viewers watching this channel, the most exciting part of this story is the possibility that these coins are not locked away in museums but could still exist in old jars, inherited collections, or forgotten boxes, because many people who saved pennies in the 1940s had no idea that errors could be valuable, let alone worth millions, and while the odds are incredibly slim, they are not zero, which is why collectors carefully examine every 1946 wheat penny they encounter, checking weight, magnetism, strike quality, doubling, and surface anomalies, knowing that even one overlooked detail could be the difference between a 1-cent coin and a life-changing discovery, and this is why stories like the $32 million 1946 wheat penny continue to capture imaginations around the world, not just because of the money involved, but because they remind us that extraordinary value can hide in ordinary places, that history leaves behind imperfect traces, and that sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest surprises, and as long as coins continue to circulate, collections continue to be rediscovered, and curiosity continues to drive people to look a little closer, the legend of the 1946 wheat penny will keep growing, inspiring new generations of collectors to search, learn, and dream of uncovering a tiny copper coin that rewrites everything they thought they knew about value. And today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and controversial stories in American numismatics. The legendary 1945 wheat penny that has captured imaginations across the world because of the belief that certain rare examples could be worth an astonishing $21 million. Number that sounds unbelievable for a humble 1-cent coin but becomes far more understandable when you uncover the extraordinary combination of historical timing, minting chaos, rare metal possibilities, dramatic errors, mysterious mistakes, and the sheer human unpredictability of wartime production that surround this coin. So settle in as we explore how a simple copper-colored Lincoln cent from 1945 could represent one of the most valuable pennies ever discussed, as we start at the end of World War II, when the United States Mint was still operating under intense pressure, rationing, and material shortages, conditions that are famous for creating rare mistakes, and 1945 stands at a unique crossroads because it follows the steel penny experiment of 1943 and the return to copper alloy cents in 1944, meaning that leftover materials, dies, and planchets were everywhere in mint facilities, creating the perfect storm for rare transitional errors, off-metal strikes, and die anomalies. And while most people think of 1943 steel cents or 1944 steel cents when talking about million-dollar pennies, the 1945 wheat penny is often overlooked, yet it exists in a shadowy category of possibility coins where documented mint practices suggest that ultra-rare error combinations could exist. Especially when you consider that in 1945 the mint used recycled shell casings composed of brass alloy, which introduced inconsistencies in composition, color, weight, and hardness, leading to planchets that did not behave normally under striking pressure, sometimes resulting in weak strikes, incomplete details, or dramatic die clashes that were not always caught during quality control. And it is within this chaos that the myth and reality of the $21,001,945 wheat penny emerges, because the value is not assigned to ordinary examples, but to hypothetical or privately held specimens that combine multiple extreme errors in one coin, such as being struck on the wrong metal, bearing a dramatic double die, having a major mint mark anomaly, and existing in pristine uncirculated or proof-like condition, all of which together create a level of rarity so intense that the numismatic market would treat it as a once-in-a-generation discovery. And to understand why collectors are willing to imagine such astronomical values, we must first understand what makes a wheat penny valuable at all, which starts with the Lincoln design introduced in 1909, a coin already rich with historical importance, and the wheat reverse design used until 1958 has become one of the most collected coin types in the world, meaning demand is already massive, and when demand meets extreme rarity, prices explode, and in 1945 the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints all produced wheat pennies, but none carry a mint mark for Philadelphia, while Denver used a D and San Francisco used an S, and each mint had its own machinery, dies, and levels of wear, making it possible for certain errors to appear at one mint and not another, which is why collectors obsess over mint marks on this date, because a 1945 wheat penny with a rare error from a specific mint could be unique or one of only a handful known, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value in numismatics, especially when combined with historical context. And one of the most discussed possibilities surrounding the $21 million valuation is the idea of a 1945 wheat penny struck on a leftover steel planchet from 1943 or a foreign planchet intended for another denomination or even another country, because although official records state that steel cents were discontinued after 1943, we know for a fact that some steel blanks remained in the system, as proven by authenticated 1944 steel cents that have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the possibility that a steel blank survived into 1945, though extraordinarily slim, is not zero, and if a genuine 1945 steel wheat penny were discovered and authenticated, it would immediately become one of the rarest U.S. coins ever known, possibly unique, and that alone could push it into multi-million-dollar territory, but the $21 million figure becomes more conceivable when you imagine that same coin also displaying a strong doubled die obverse, where Lincoln's profile, date, and lettering show clear separation, doubling, and notching visible to the naked eye, because double die errors are created during the die-making process and are far rarer than machine doubling, and collectors pay massive premiums for strong examples, and a double die on an already unique off-metal strike would create a coin so rare that it would be nearly impossible to compare it to anything else in the market, and then add the possibility of a mint mark error, such as a repunched mint mark, over mint mark, or even a missing or misplaced mint mark that contradicts known production records, and suddenly you have a coin that challenges established numismatic Knowledge, which is something elite collectors and museums are willing to pay extraordinary sums to own, because such coins do not just represent money, they represent unanswered questions and gaps in historical understanding, and beyond steel, there is also the possibility of a 1945 wheat penny struck on a silver planchet, a brass foreign blank, or a bronze alloy with an abnormal composition that significantly alters weight and color, because during wartime the mint often processed foreign coins and metals alongside U.S. coinage, and mistakes did happen, as documented by off-metal errors from other years, and a confirmed silver or foreign metal 1945 cent would be a sensational discovery, especially if it survived in mint state condition, untouched by circulation, because condition is another critical factor in reaching million-dollar valuations. And while most error coins are found worn or damaged, a pristine example suggests it was noticed early or preserved intentionally, adding to its mystique and desirability. And then there are dramatic strike errors that can elevate value even further, such as broad strikes where the coin lacks a collar and spreads outward, off-center strikes where part of the design is missing, or double strikes where the coin is struck twice at different angles, and while these errors are fascinating, they are usually not worth millions on their own, but when combined with rare dates, off-metal composition, and doubled dies, they become part of a perfect storm scenario that can justify valuations in the tens of millions, because collectors are not just buying a coin, they are buying a convergence of improbabilities, and the 1945 wheat penny sits at a moment in history where improbabilities were more common than usual due to the pressures of wartime production and the transition back to peacetime minting. And another factor that fuels the $21 million narrative is provenance, meaning the documented history of ownership, because if a rare 1945 wheat penny were discovered in a famous collection, an old estate, or a hoard linked to a mint employee or wartime factory, the story alone would dramatically increase its value, as collectors place enormous importance on documented backstories that connect coins to historical events or individuals. And imagine a scenario where a mint worker quietly saved a strange-looking 1945 cent that rang differently, weighed differently, or looked unusual, and that coin remained hidden for decades before resurfacing. Such stories are not fantasy, they have happened before in numismatics, and when they do, the market reacts with intense excitement, driving prices to levels that outsiders find unbelievable, and this is why you will often see headlines claiming that a 1945 wheat penny is worth $21 million, because while no publicly sold example has reached that figure, the theoretical value of a perfect storm specimen absolutely could, based on comparable sales of other ultra-rare coins, such as the 1943 bronze cent, the 1804 silver dollar, or the 1913 Liberty nickel, all of which were once considered impossible until proven real, and now command prices in the millions, and collectors know that rarity is often hidden in plain sight, especially with pennies, which were widely circulated and often ignored. Meaning rare examples could still exist undiscovered in jars, drawers, or old collections, and this possibility keeps the dream alive for everyday people who search their change, because the idea that a single penny could change your life is incredibly powerful, and from a technical perspective, experts would examine a potential $21,001,945 wheat penny for specific diagnostics, including precise weight measurements, metal composition analysis using XRF testing, microscopic die markers, and comparison to known genuine dies from that year, because authentication is everything at this level, and the market would only accept such a coin if it were certified by top grading services and verified by multiple independent experts, but once confirmed, the bidding wars between elite collectors, investors, and institutions could easily push prices into unprecedented territory, especially in an era where rare tangible assets are increasingly seen as safe stores of value, and coins with legendary status often outperform expectations at auction. And beyond the technicalities, there is also the emotional and psychological aspect of value, because coins like the hypothetical $21,001,945 wheat penny represent hope, mystery, and the thrill of discovery, and collectors are often willing to pay irrationally high prices for coins that capture public imagination, because owning such a piece is about prestige and legacy as much as it is about money. And the Lincoln cent is especially powerful in this regard, because it features one of the most beloved figures in American history, making it emotionally resonant even to non-collectors, and this broad appeal expands the pool of potential buyers far beyond traditional numismatists, which is another reason values can skyrocket. And when you combine all of these factors, wartime chaos, transitional metal usage, potential off-metal strikes, doubled dies, mint mark anomalies, extreme rarity, pristine condition, compelling provenance, strong demand, historical importance, and emotional resonance, the idea of a 1945 wheat penny being worth $21 million no longer sounds like clickbait, but rather a theoretical peak value for the most extraordinary example imaginable. And while most 1945 wheat pennies are worth only a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition, the lesson here is that not all coins are created equal, and sometimes the smallest differences can mean the difference between pocket change and generational wealth, which is why we always encourage viewers to look closely at their coins, learn about errors, study weight and magnetism, and never dismiss a coin just because it looks ordinary at first glance, because history has shown us again and again that the most valuable treasures are often hiding in the most unassuming places. And as we continue to explore rare coins here on Liberty Coins Value, remember that knowledge is your most powerful tool, because understanding what makes a coin valuable is the first step toward recognizing one when it appears. And the story of the 1945 wheat penny reminds us that even in the most chaotic times, or perhaps especially in those times, mistakes can become miracles, and ordinary objects can become legends, and that is why the humble wheat penny continues to fascinate collectors around the world and inspire dreams of discovery, fortune, and history resting quietly in the palm of your hand. Next, 1953 D Wheat Penny. The place where everyday pocket change can turn into life-changing fortune stories, and today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about coins in American numismatic history, the legendary 1953 D Wheat Penny, a humble copper cent that at first glance looks just like any other old penny, but under the right circumstances, with the right combination of rare errors, minting mistakes, survival conditions, and historical anomalies, has been rumored, discussed, and speculated by collectors and experts alike as being capable of reaching astonishing valuations as high as $19 million, making it one of the most unbelievable what-if coins in the entire Lincoln Wheat Cent series. And as we begin this journey, remember that many of the greatest coin discoveries ever made started with curiosity and careful observation. So stay with us, because the details you learn today could forever change the way you look at the pennies sitting in old jars, drawers, inherited collections, or even your everyday change, because the story of the 1953 D Wheat Penny is not just about a coin, it is about how mistakes at the mint, human error, mechanical failure, transitional periods in coin production, and unexpected survivals can combine into the perfect storm of rarity and value, transforming a 1-cent piece into a multi-million-dollar numismatic legend. And to truly understand how this is possible, we need to step back into the early 1950s, a time when the United States Mint was operating at full capacity to supply coins for a booming post-war economy, when billions of cents were needed for daily commerce, and when the Denver Mint, marked by the D Mint mark beneath the date, was striking massive quantities of Lincoln wheat cents using high-speed presses, worn dies, and intense production schedules, conditions that were ideal for errors to slip through unnoticed, especially when quality control standards were far different from what they are today. And the 1953 D Wheat Penny was struck during this very environment, using bronze planchets composed primarily of copper with small amounts of tin and zinc, a composition that had been used for decades but was under constant scrutiny due to fluctuating metal prices and supply pressures. And while the official records show hundreds of millions of 1953 D cents produced, raw mintage numbers alone do not tell the full story, because within those massive totals exist microscopic populations of extreme error coins, transitional anomalies, and unique die events that can elevate a single example into legendary status. One of the most important factors that can push a 1953 D Wheat Penny into the realm of extraordinary value is the presence of a wrong planchet error, where the coin was accidentally struck on a metal blank intended for a different denomination or composition. And while wrong planchet errors are known across many years, they become exponentially more valuable when they involve combinations that should never have occurred, such as a 1953 D Wheat Penny struck on a silver planchet intended for a dime, quarter, or even a foreign coin. And if such a piece were confirmed, authenticated, and preserved in high-grade condition, the numismatic world would erupt because it would represent a minting impossibility that somehow escaped detection. And collectors are willing to pay astronomical prices for impossibilities made real, especially when they come from a popular series. Like the Lincoln wheat cent, another extremely important value driver is the possibility of a transitional composition error, because the early 1950s were a period when the mint was experimenting, testing, and planning for future changes in coin metal content, and any cent that was accidentally struck on an experimental or off-metal planchet, perhaps a leftover steel blank, brass alloy, or an experimental copper mix, would be instantly recognized as a once-in-a-lifetime find, and while the famous 1943 steel cent and 1944 steel cent errors are well documented, the idea of a 1953 D cent struck on an unauthorized metal adds a layer of mystery and intrigue that collectors crave, especially if metallurgical testing confirms a unique composition never officially released. And beyond planchet errors, the die errors associated with the 1953 D wheat penny play an equally critical role in its potential multi-million-dollar valuation, because die errors represent the fingerprints of the minting process itself, frozen moments where something went catastrophically wrong during die preparation, hubbing, or usage, and one of the most dramatic die-related possibilities is a doubled die obverse or reverse of extreme magnitude, not the minor doubling seen on common coins, but bold, dramatic, easily visible doubling affecting the date, lettering, Lincoln's profile, or wheat ears. And if a previously unknown doubled die of exceptional strength were discovered on a 1953 D cent, especially one that escaped classification for decades, it would send shockwaves through the numismatic community, because new major doubled dies are incredibly rare discoveries in modern times, and collectors compete fiercely for ownership of newly recognized varieties. Another die-related phenomenon that can propel a coin into the stratosphere is a major die break or retained cut that dramatically alters the design, creating large raised blobs of metal, missing design elements, or distorted fields that make the coin look almost sculptural, and when such errors are combined with pristine surfaces, full original luster, and minimal handling, their value skyrockets because they represent extreme mechanical failures preserved in near-perfect condition. And then there is the possibility of a mule error, one of the rarest and most coveted mistakes in all of numismatics, where two dies from different coins are accidentally paired together, and while mules are extraordinarily rare for cents, the theoretical existence of a 1953 D wheat penny struck with a mismatched reverse, perhaps a later memorial reverse or an experimental design, would be considered one of the greatest mint errors ever discovered, and a coin of that nature would not just be worth millions, it would be priceless to museums and elite private collectors. And beyond these mechanical and metallurgical mistakes, the condition of the coin itself plays a massive role in determining its ultimate value. Because error coins are often heavily circulated, damaged, or mishandled before their significance is recognized, but a 1953 D wheat penny that somehow survived untouched, stored away in a mint set, roll, or forgotten hoard, retaining blazing original red color, sharp strike details, and flawless surfaces, would already be worth a substantial premium even without errors. And when you combine that level of preservation with one or more extreme minting anomalies, the valuation becomes almost theoretical, driven by auction competition, collector psychology, and the simple fact that there may never be another opportunity to acquire such a piece, and this is how values climb from thousands to hundreds of thousands and eventually into the millions, especially when wealthy collectors view ownership not just as an investment but as a legacy, something to be passed down, displayed, and remembered. And another critical aspect that adds to the mystique of the 1953 D wheat penny is the role of undocumented varieties and the possibility that some of the most extreme examples remain undiscovered, sitting quietly in old collections where their owners have no idea what they possess, because not every error was catalogued when it was made, and not every coin was examined under magnification by experts, and as technology advances, allowing for more precise analysis of metal composition, die markers, and strike characteristics, coins that were once dismissed as oddities can suddenly be reclassified as unique mint errors, instantly rewriting their value, and this constant evolution of knowledge keeps the door open for discoveries that can redefine what we think we know about a particular year or mint, and the Denver Mint in particular has a history of producing interesting and sometimes controversial errors, partly due to its high output and the wear placed on equipment, And the 1953 production year sits in a sweet spot where documentation is incomplete, dies were reused extensively, and quality control was stretched thin, creating the perfect conditions for mistakes to occur and escape into circulation. And when you add in human factors such as inexperienced workers, long shifts, and pressure to meet quotas, it becomes easier to imagine how something extraordinary could slip through unnoticed. And from a market perspective, the Lincoln Wheat Cent series is one of the most widely collected and emotionally resonant series in American coinage, spanning generations of collectors who remember searching rolls, albums, and change jars for key dates and varieties. And this broad collector base creates intense demand for rare examples, because unlike obscure denominations that appeal to a small niche, a legendary wheat penny appeals to millions of people. And when demand meets extreme rarity, prices can climb to levels that seem unbelievable to outsiders. And this is why stories of million-dollar pennies capture public imagination, because they represent the ultimate treasure hunt fantasy, the idea that something so small and common could be so valuable. And the rumored $19 million valuation attached to the most extreme theoretical 1953 wheat penny is not based on a single fixed price guide number, but rather on the convergence of all the highest value factors imaginable, including a never-before-seen error type, unique metal composition, dramatic visual impact, flawless condition, confirmed authenticity by top grading services, documented provenance, and intense bidding competition among elite collectors and institutions. And when all of these elements align, traditional valuation metrics break down and the final price becomes whatever the top bidder is willing to pay. And history has shown that in the right circumstances, collectors are willing to pay staggering sums for coins that represent the pinnacle of rarity and significance. And another often overlooked factor is the psychological impact of firsts and uniques, because the first discovery of a particular error or the only known example carries a premium that cannot be replicated. And if a 1953 wheat penny were confirmed as the only known example of its kind, whether due to metal composition, die pairing, or minting anomaly, its value would be in a category of its own, driven by the simple fact that ownership confers exclusivity that no amount of money can easily replicate. And this exclusivity is especially powerful in the coin world, where provenance, pedigree, and uniqueness are prized above all else. And beyond the technical aspects, there is also the narrative value of such a coin, the story it tells about American history, industrial processes, and human error. And collectors often pay as much for the story as they do for the object itself, because owning a legendary coin means owning a piece of history that can be shared, exhibited, and remembered. And the 1953 wheat penny sits at an interesting crossroads in history, bridging the classic era of wheat cents and the modern age of memorial cents that would begin just a few years later, making it one of the last representatives of a beloved design. And any extraordinary example from this period carries additional emotional weight for collectors who view wheat cents as symbols of a bygone era. And when you consider all of these factors together, it becomes easier to understand how a 1-cent coin from 1953 could even be discussed in the context of multi-million dollar valuations, because the value is not in the face value, but in the convergence of rarity, condition, error significance, collector demand, historical context, and narrative power. And while not every 1953 wheat penny will be worth more than a cent, and most are worth only modest amounts even in high grade, the possibility that somewhere out there exists a single example that embodies all of these extraordinary characteristics is what keeps collectors searching, examining, and dreaming. And that is why we encourage everyone watching to look closely at their coins, to learn the signs of errors, to understand the minting process, and to appreciate the incredible journey that even the smallest piece of copper can take from the mint floor to the auction block, because the next great discovery could be sitting unnoticed in a collection right now. And the story of the 1953 wheat penny reminds us that value is not always obvious at first glance, that mistakes can become masterpieces, and that in the world of numismatics, knowledge truly is power. And as we continue to explore these fascinating stories here on Liberty Coins Value, remember to stay curious, stay informed, and never underestimate the potential hidden in the coins you hold, because sometimes, history leaves behind treasures in the most unexpected places. Next, 1946 wheat penny. Today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and talked about Lincoln cents of the post-war era, the 1946 wheat penny, a coin that many people overlook because it appears ordinary at first glance but has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide due to rare errors, striking mistakes, unusual minting possibilities, and legendary examples that are believed to be worth as much as $12 million, and as we begin this journey it is important to understand that the year 1946 sits at a unique crossroads in American history because it marked the first full year after World War II, a time when the United States Mint was transitioning from wartime production pressures back into peacetime operations. Machinery was heavily used and often worn, metal supplies had fluctuated during the war years, and mint workers were adjusting to increased demand for coinage in a booming economy, all of which created the perfect environment for mistakes, anomalies, and rare varieties to slip through unnoticed, and these conditions are exactly what makes certain 1946 wheat pennies so valuable and so mysterious today, because while millions were struck, only a microscopic number were struck in ways that defied the normal standards of minting, creating coins that stand apart from the rest and fuel stories of multi-million-dollar valuations. Beginning with the basic composition of the 1946 wheat penny, which returned to a copper-based alloy after the experimental steel cents of 1943 and the transitional bronze compositions of 1944 and 1945, and while most 1946 cents were struck using a standard bronze alloy of approximately 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, there are persistent and intriguing reports among advanced numismatists of off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, and transitional alloy experiments that may have occurred as the mint refined its processes, including the theoretical existence of a 1946 cent struck on leftover steel planchets or foreign planchets, which if authenticated would instantly become one of the most valuable error coins in the world due to its extreme rarity and historical significance, because a single confirmed example of such an error would represent a unique failure in quality control at a time when the mint was believed to have returned to normal operations. And it is this possibility alone that has driven speculative valuations into the multi-million-dollar range, especially when combined with the intense demand among elite collectors who compete fiercely for unique items that no one else can own, and beyond composition errors. The 1946 wheat penny is also known for dramatic die errors, including doubled dies, repunched mint marks, misaligned dies, die breaks, cuts, and clashes, each of which contributes layers of value depending on severity, visibility, and rarity. And among these the doubled die obverse varieties are perhaps the most famous because they can produce noticeable doubling on the date, the word liberty, and the motto "In God We Trust," and while minor doubling is relatively common and often caused by machine doubling, true doubled die varieties originate during the die creation process and represent a permanent flaw in the die itself, meaning every coin struck from that die carries the same dramatic doubling, and in the case of the 1946 wheat penny, certain doubled die examples have been rumored to exist with exceptionally strong separation visible even to the naked eye, making them highly desirable and extraordinarily rare, and when such a coin is found in high mint state condition with original luster, minimal contact marks, and strong strike details, the value can skyrocket beyond conventional price guides, especially when provenance can be traced to early discoveries or prominent collections, because provenance adds credibility, mystique, and historical continuity that wealthy collectors are willing to pay a premium for. And another major category of errors involves off-center strikes, where the coin was not properly aligned between the dies at the moment of striking, resulting in a partially missing design, and while minor off-center strikes are collected and valued, a dramatic off-center 1946 wheat penny that still shows the full date while missing a large portion of the design is far rarer and more valuable, and if such a coin also retains sharp details, minimal wear, and an attractive overall appearance, it becomes a trophy-level piece. And when combined with other errors such as a broad strike or a partial collar error where the coin spreads beyond its normal diameter, the uniqueness compounds, pushing potential valuations into extraordinary territory. And then there are die cap errors, where a coin becomes stuck to one of the dies and continues to strike subsequent planchets, creating a cap-like impression. And a genuine 1946 wheat penny die cap error in an advanced stage would be an extraordinary survivor, as most such errors are destroyed or recycled, and the survival of one in collectible condition would represent a rare glimpse into the chaotic side of minting, making it immensely valuable to collectors who specialize in dramatic mint errors, and further adding to the mystique of the 1946 wheat penny are strike-through errors, where foreign materials such as grease, cloth fibers, Metal shavings, or debris became trapped between the die and the planchet during striking, leaving unusual impressions, missing details, or textured surfaces, and while many strike-throughs are subtle, some are dramatic and visually compelling, and a large, well-documented strike-through error from 1946 that affects major design elements can command exceptional prices, particularly when the foreign material can be identified and linked to minting processes of the era, adding an educational and historical dimension that collectors appreciate, and another critical factor in the valuation of any 1946 wheat penny is its mint origin, as coins were struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each with its own mint mark characteristics, production volumes, and error profiles, and while Philadelphia cents lack a mint mark, Denver and San Francisco coins bear small d or s marks that can themselves be the subject of errors such as repunched mint marks, over mint marks, or misplaced mint marks, and a dramatic repunched mint mark on a 1946 D or 1946 S cent can significantly enhance value, particularly when the underlying punch is clearly visible and distinct, and when such an error is paired with other anomalies like die cracks or doubling, the resulting coin becomes exponentially rarer. And one of the most intriguing possibilities discussed in advanced numismatic circles is the existence of a 1946 wheat penny struck using experimental dies or hub varieties that were never officially documented, because during the post-war period the mint was refining hub designs and die preparation techniques, and undocumented variations could have occurred, leaving behind a tiny number of coins with subtle but significant design differences, such as altered lettering shapes, spacing anomalies, or unusual relief characteristics, and if a unique hub variety were confirmed for 1946, it would instantly elevate the coin into legendary status, especially if only one or two examples were known, because unique varieties occupy a special place in numismatics where traditional price limits no longer apply and value is determined by desire, competition, and prestige rather than standardized guides, and condition plays an equally crucial role in driving values into the millions, because while circulated examples of 1946 wheat pennies are common and worth modest sums, a flawless or near-flawless example graded at the highest levels by a respected grading service represents an entirely different category, especially when combined with a major error or variety. Because such a coin would represent the absolute pinnacle of preservation, surviving decades without wear, corrosion, cleaning, or damage, and collectors pay extraordinary premiums for perfection because it is finite and irreplaceable, and when rumors circulate of a 1946 wheat penny graded at an unprecedented level with a dramatic error, speculation naturally escalates, fueling stories of $12 million valuations, and these stories are further amplified by private sales, confidential transactions, and whispered negotiations among elite collectors where prices are not publicly disclosed, allowing imagination and speculation to flourish, and beyond physical characteristics, historical context adds emotional value that cannot be quantified easily, because a 1946 wheat penny connects directly to the optimism and rebuilding of a nation emerging from global conflict, and collectors are often drawn to coins that symbolize turning points in history, and when such symbolism is combined with extreme rarity and dramatic minting errors, the result is a perfect storm of desirability, and another aspect that cannot be ignored is the psychology of treasure hunting, because the idea that a coin potentially worth $12 million could still be hiding in an old jar, forgotten collection, or inherited estate captures the imagination of the public and keeps interest alive, driving demand for information, searches, and authentication services, and this ongoing interest reinforces the perceived value of legendary examples, even when only a handful may truly justify such astronomical figures, and authentication itself becomes a critical component, because for a 1946 wheat penny to command multi-million-dollar value it must be authenticated, graded, and verified by experts who can confirm that the errors are genuine and not the result of post-mint damage or alteration, and the cost, time, and expertise involved in this process add another layer of exclusivity. Because only serious collectors and investors can navigate it successfully, and once a coin passes through this gauntlet and emerges as a confirmed, unique, or ultra-rare example, its value is no longer constrained by traditional metrics, and it enters the realm of art-like valuation where rarity, story, and desirability dominate, and the market for such coins is global, with buyers from around the world competing for the opportunity to own a piece of history that no one else can replicate, and This competition can drive prices to astonishing heights, especially in private auctions or negotiated sales where emotions and prestige play significant roles, and it is important to note that not every 1946 wheat penny is worth millions, but the existence of even one extraordinary example elevates the entire year in the eyes of collectors and keeps the hunt alive, because possibility itself has value. And every time a new hoard is discovered, an old collection is examined, or a previously unknown error comes to light, the narrative evolves, and the legend of the 1946 wheat penny grows stronger, reinforcing its reputation as a coin where mistakes became masterpieces and accidents became fortunes, and this is why collectors are encouraged to examine their coins carefully, looking for unusual weight, magnetic properties, design anomalies, doubling, misalignment, and any deviation from the norm. Because while the odds are slim, the rewards are life-changing, and the story of the $12,001,946 wheat penny serves as a reminder that history is not always neat and perfect, and that sometimes the most valuable treasures are born from imperfection, oversight, and human error. And as we continue to explore these incredible stories here on Liberty Coins Value, remember that knowledge is the first step toward discovery. Because the more you understand about minting processes, historical context, and error identification, the better equipped you are to recognize something extraordinary when it appears in your hands, and whether or not you ever find a legendary 1946 wheat penny, the journey itself connects you to the past and to a global community of collectors who share the same fascination with small objects that carry immense stories, hidden value, and endless possibilities. Last 1944 wheat penny. In everyday pocket change come alive, and today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating, mysterious, and talked about coins in American numismatic history, a coin that on the surface looks ordinary but under the right circumstances has been rumored, speculated, and documented in elite collecting circles as being worth up to $9 million, and that coin is the 1944 wheat penny. So settle in, stay focused, and imagine for a moment that a single small copper cent struck during World War II could change a life forever, because the story of the 1944 wheat penny is not just about metal and minting, it is about wartime urgency, industrial mistakes, experimental alloys, human error, die fatigue, planchet confusion, and the rare convergence of multiple anomalies that together transform a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar artifact. And to truly understand why a 1944 wheat penny can reach values that sound unbelievable, we must first travel back to a time when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure, copper was critical for ammunition and military wiring, factories were operating at maximum speed, and millions upon millions of Lincoln cents were being struck rapidly with little room for perfection, and while most people know that 1943 steel pennies exist because copper was diverted for the war effort, fewer realize that the transition back to copper in 1944 created one of the most dangerous and error-prone environments in mint history, because leftover steel planchets from 1943 were still circulating inside mint facilities, copper shell casings were being melted and repurposed into planchets, and mint workers were racing against time to meet national demand, which created a perfect storm where mistakes were not only possible but inevitable. And the first major reason a 1944 wheat penny can be worth extraordinary money is the existence of wrong planchet errors, especially those struck on steel instead of copper, because even though the official composition for 1944 cents returned to a copper alloy made largely from recycled ammunition shell casings, a very small number of steel blanks from 1943 remained lodged in hoppers, stuck in machinery, or overlooked during cleanup, and when these steel blanks were fed into the presses in 1944 and struck with 1944 dated dies, the result was an accidental hybrid that technically should not exist, a 1944 steel wheat penny, and while only a handful are known today, each authenticated example has commanded massive prices at auction, with values increasing dramatically over time, and when collectors and investors speculate about a 1944 wheat penny reaching $9 million, they are often referring to a theoretical perfect storm specimen, one that combines a steel planchet, pristine condition, full mint luster, sharp strike, and documented provenance, because rarity alone is powerful. But rarity combined with condition and historical significance is explosive, and beyond steel planchets, there is also the equally intriguing possibility of off-metal errors involving brass, bronze, or experimental alloy mixes, since the shell casing copper used in 1944 varied slightly in composition depending on the source, and this inconsistency created cents that appear subtly different in color, weight, and density, and while many of these variations are minor, some represent transitional alloy errors that advanced collectors aggressively pursue, especially if metallurgical testing confirms non-standard composition, and another layer of value comes from mint mark anomalies, because 1944 wheat pennies were struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, and each mint had its own machinery, staff habits, and error tendencies, and at the Denver Mint in particular. The 1944 D wheat penny is famous for repunched mint marks, tilted mint marks, filled D mint marks, and even missing mint marks caused by grease-filled dies, and while these errors are often dismissed by casual collectors, high-grade dramatic examples with clear diagnostics can command significant premiums, especially when combined with other errors like die cracks or doubled features. And speaking of doubling, one of the most sought-after characteristics that can elevate a 1944 wheat penny into the realm of big money is genuine hub doubling, not mechanical doubling or strike doubling, but true double die errors created when a die received multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, and while the 1944 Doubled Die Obverse is not as famous as the 1955 Doubled Die, authentic examples do exist with noticeable doubling on Lincoln's date, motto, and lettering, and when such doubling is bold, well preserved, and certified by top grading services, its desirability increases exponentially. Especially if paired with other anomalies, because collectors love coins that tell multiple error stories at once, and beyond doubling, die cracks and die breaks play a major role in the value equation, since wartime production schedules meant dies were often used far beyond their ideal lifespan, resulting in dramatic cracks running through dates, lettering, or Lincoln's portrait, and in extreme cases, these cracks evolved into retained cut errors where chunks of the die broke away, leaving raised blobs of metal on the coin, and while minor cracks are common and add little value, massive retained cuts that affect key design areas are rare and highly collectible, and when such errors appear on early copper alloy cents like the 1944 wheat penny, they attract strong attention from error specialists. And then there are strike errors, including off-center strikes, broad strikes without a collar, and multiple strike errors where a planchet was struck more than once in misaligned positions, and while many off-center coins survive, those that remain uncirculated, centered enough to show full date and mint mark, and exhibit dramatic visual appeal can command astonishing prices, particularly when combined with historical years like 1944, and the possibilities do not stop there, because clashed dies are another fascinating error category tied directly to rushed wartime production, occurring when obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghostly impressions of opposite-side elements on subsequent coins. And on 1944 wheat pennies, clash marks can sometimes be seen in Lincoln's fields or near the wheat ears, and while light clashing is common, heavy, clearly visible clash remnants are scarce and desirable, especially if preserved in high grade. And another overlooked but critical factor in why a 1944 wheat penny could be worth millions is condition rarity, because while billions of cents were struck, most entered circulation immediately and were heavily worn, corroded, or melted, and finding a 1944 wheat penny in absolute top condition, with blazing original luster, sharp strike, no carbon spots, and full red color is exceptionally difficult, and grading populations show that even common-date wheat pennies become rare at the highest levels, and when you combine top-grade preservation with a rare error type, the value curve rises steeply, sometimes exponentially, and the $9 million figure often discussed in elite numismatic circles represents the hypothetical pinnacle specimen, a coin that is unique or nearly unique, combining wrong planchet, pristine preservation, and full documentation, because in numismatics, uniqueness is king, and collectors with unlimited budgets compete fiercely for trophies that no one else can own, and history supports this idea, as we have seen coins like the 1943 bronze cent and the 1804 silver dollar reach astronomical prices not simply because they are old, but because they occupy legendary status as mistakes that were never supposed to exist, and the 1944 wheat penny, under the right circumstances, fits squarely into that tradition. And another aspect often overlooked by casual observers is provenance, because a coin's ownership history can dramatically affect its value, especially if it can be traced to a mint employee collection, a wartime estate, or an early discovery that predates widespread public awareness, and coins with long, documented histories inspire confidence and excitement among bidders, and when a rare 1944 wheat penny surfaces with original envelopes, letters, or photographs supporting its story, it transcends being just a coin and becomes a historical artifact. And then there is the psychological factor of wartime mythology, because coins produced during World War II carry emotional weight, representing sacrifice, industrial might, and national survival, and collectors are drawn to tangible objects from this era, especially those that symbolize imperfection within a massive system, and a 1944 wheat penny era perfectly embodies that theme, a small human or mechanical mistake frozen in metal during a time when perfection was demanded but not always achievable, and market dynamics also play a role, because the rare coin market thrives on stories, and stories drive demand. And few stories are as compelling as a penny that should be worth 1 cent but might be worth millions, and as social media, YouTube, and online auctions expand awareness, competition for top-tier examples intensifies, pushing prices higher and higher, especially when a coin becomes known as a once-in-a-generation opportunity, and while not every 1944 wheat penny is valuable, and most are worth only modest sums, the possibility that one exists with the right combination of errors, condition, and provenance keeps collectors searching rolls, jars, and old collections to this day, and this ongoing treasure hunt fuels market interest and reinforces the coin's legendary status, and it is important to understand that numismatics values potential as much as reality, because even if a $9,001,944 wheat penny has not yet publicly sold at that exact figure, the trajectory of similar era coins suggests it is within the realm of possibility under the right auction conditions, especially if 2 or more wealthy collectors decide they must own it at any cost, and this is why authentication and certification are critical, because only coins verified by respected grading services with clear error attribution can command such extraordinary sums, and the discovery of an unrecognized example could instantly rewrite price records, and that possibility is what makes the 1944 wheat penny endlessly fascinating, because it represents not just what has already been found, but what might still be out there waiting to be discovered in a forgotten drawer or inherited collection. And as we reflect on the errors, mistakes, and possibilities that give this coin its immense potential value, we see that the 1944 wheat penny is more than copper and zinc, it is a convergence of history, human imperfection, scarcity, condition, and desire, and that is why collectors continue to study it, talk about it, and dream about finding one. And if you have a 1944 wheat penny, it is worth examining carefully, checking its weight, magnetism, strike quality, mint mark, and overall appearance, because while the odds are slim, the reward could be life-changing, and stories of ordinary people discovering extraordinary coins remind us why numismatics captures the imagination, and why a simple 1-cent piece from 1944 can command attention, excitement, and valuations that seem almost unreal. And as the market evolves and new discoveries are made, the legend of the 1944 wheat penny will only grow, continuing to inspire collectors around the world to look closer at their change and to never underestimate the power of a small mistake made during a very big moment in history.